members of the executive management, members of Senate, our inaugurant this afternoon, Professor Guruvasagie Daisy Pillay, family and friends of Professor Pillay, academics and professional staff, students, alumni, and distinguished guests. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Nanopogu, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural lecture of Professor Daisy Pillay. The Vice Chancellor conveys his congratulations and best wishes to Professor Daisy Pillay, who is delivering this afternoon's lecture. The Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Nhlanhla Nene, also sends his apologies and congratulations to Professor Pillay. Inaugural lectures form part of the university's public lecture series and may only be presented by newly appointed full professors who have been appointed in academic schools and centers. Inaugural lectures present an opportunity for showcasing the exciting and groundbreaking research and teaching being carried out by professors in our university. Each lecture represents a significant milestone in an academic's career, providing official recognition of their promotion or appointment to full professor. These lectures are furthermore an ideal opportunity for new professors to introduce themselves and to present an overview of their own contribution to their field to academic peers, students, and research collaborators. Inaugural lectures are also a platform for celebrating a full professor's academic achievement with his or her family, friends, mentors, and colleagues. I would like to acknowledge the following guests: members of the executive, members of Senate, our inaugurant, Professor Pillay, family and friends of Professor Pillay, particularly Pavi Pillay, the husband of Professor Pillay, her brother, her mother and cousins who are present here today, the academics that are here today, students, alumni, as well as the many international collaborators, as well as national collaborators who have worked with Professor Pillay in her distinguished career. It is now my pleasure to formally introduce our inaugurant, Professor Pillay, to you all. Professor Pillay is a full professor in the discipline of Teacher Development Studies here in the College of Humanities at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She received her doctoral degree in teacher education from the University of Durban-Westville in 2003. Professor Pillay joined the Faculty of Education at the University of Durban-Westville on the 1st of January 1996 as a junior lecturer in teacher education and gradually advanced to the permanent position of lecturer in 1998. Since then, she has served in various leadership positions at school, faculty, and university forums. Her work speaks of her deepening interest in decolonization debates as an alternative discourse to Western thought and dominant singular ways of thinking, being, and knowing. Publication by reputable international publishers like Routledge, Springer, Information Age Publishing, Critical Studies, and Sense attest to the international recognition of her research and its contribution to educational research. Prof. Pillay's research is rooted in teacher development studies, working within a corporatized neoliberal university culture dominated by productivity-driven narratives. She engages in research inquiry, for example, in narrative inquiry, in autoethnography and memory work, as well as arts-based educational research and theoretical projects to muse and promote the study of teacher researchers entangled in everyday lives as embodied aesthetics experiences of self-transformation. Prof. Pillay's scholarly work weaves her focus on the ethics and aesthetics of being or becoming in the world, both human and beyond. Prof. Pillay is a C1 rated NRF researcher, having moved from being a C3 rated researcher in 2013. Prof. Pillay's research attests to her work's transdisciplinary and transglobal nature in the areas of fine arts, communication and literature studies, visual arts, accounting education, medical health education, and related fields. As an active member of ARA, of BERA and SAERA, and the Arts-Based Educational Research and Self-Study SIG, she's been working with international and local experts to support development of early career academics and emerging researchers. She's been invited to collaborate and support and develop with colleagues from the universities of Mauritius, Canada, New Zealand, Ireland, and the UK. She's been invited to conduct and facilitate workshops for students and staff at various other universities. These include the Faculty of Health Sciences at UCT, the Faculty of Arts at Rhodes, the academic staff development for the Faculty of Education at Northwest, the Faculty of Education at UNISA, the School of Education in Nottingham, and King's College, London. The 7 guest-edited journal issues and 4 edited research volumes further highlight the expanding international and national networks developed in the critical scholarship that has evolved from a research interest and projects. Fundraising for research is key to academic standing at the university. To date, she has led 5 NRF-funded projects as co-investigator in 4 national NRF-funded projects, and has led 4 projects funded by UTLO, as well as the university competitive grant. She served as co-investigator and facilitator in 5 competitive grant projects led by academics at UKZN and at other national and international universities. You may wonder about her impact on society. She has been working as an academic and social scientist, and she's got comprehensive and extensive experience in this regard. This includes opportunities to support in-service and pre-service teacher professional learning and development, research and development activities to support research outcomes, publishing academic articles, research training, as well as staff development. Prof. Pillay has graduated more than 35 postgraduate students, 12 of whom graduated with doctoral degrees. Overall, Professor Pillay demonstrates her passion for creative scholarship and knowledge production as enfleshments of embodied ethical practice, a topic she'll engage with us today. Prof. Pillay, over to you, and congratulations.
Thank you, Dean, Prof. Talbot Msibi, and thank you to all present here today. Intellectual journeying to embodiment and enfleshment, art making, and educational research as transgressive assemblages of becoming. In Altman's film MASH, a US Army captain played by Alan Alda said, "The creative is a place where no one has ever been. You have to leave the city of your comfort and go into the wilderness of your intuition. You cannot go there by bus, only by hard work, risking and not by quite knowing what you are doing. What you will discover will be wonderful, yourself." What happens when we use art and art making as methods to turn our gaze onto the self, to be known and studied? How do pathways of inquiry change, and for whom? What knowledges do these creative paths engender? Let me start by first unpacking a few concepts that I think will inform this lecture. What do I mean by art? Simply explained, it's the expression and application of creative skill and imagination in the production of an aesthetic object, typically in a visual form such as a painting or a sculpture, or producing works primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Example, the art of the Renaissance, which many of you know. Art making, on the other hand, serves as an imagination place to express a personal idea, thought, or emotion with curiosity and playfulness. In my scholarship, art, more specifically visual material, gives cluck to the feelings beyond just the mere application of technique and skill. Art and art making can serve as entry points to awaken creative and practical modes for researching education, using theories that recognize personal stories and personal feelings. According to Paul, Roswell, and Bartlett, the visual offers a place and a space where things can be told and personal stories can be heard. And sometimes untold stories can be experienced and expressed materially and practically, and I would like to add, artfully. In my arts-based research scholarship, I have examined how visual art, art making, and educational research can be arranged temporarily in strange and unusual relationships and interconnections in the construction and circulation of different knowledge. This arrangement is what I describe in this lecture as an assemblage, which has its origins in the French word agencement. And it is an arrangement of and the action of arranging some heterogeneous human and non-human elements. For example, when you put together a presentation like this, and Zoom is so much part of it, and how they interrelate in unexpected and productive ways to connect and interconnect, oozing with some kind of affect and vitality. As South Africans, we can use visual material as modes for ethical practice, to look the beast of the apartheid past in the eye, in order not to allow it to imprison us. 28 years into our democracy, we continue to experience the residues of brutal, racist apartheid rule. The beast of the past lingers. And as our education teachers and students in South Africa, we continue to experience the effects of decades of intellectual, social, and cultural impoverishment, now complicated by the neoliberal malaise. In my intellectual journey of becoming, I hope to offer you glimpses of my imagination places that I individually, collectively, and aesthetically took up to think, to experience, and to reflexively meditate on personal experiences and ideas in scholarly ways. The ethical embodied connections to my scholarly work and writing is to create an alternate form of existence and the ongoing project of becoming other. It is, as Foucault says, work in progress. My artworks are my thoughts and feelings clothed in artful form and expressed and experienced to intervene and construct the world. Life cannot be captured in words only and not deadened by words only. In trusting the enfleshment process, it is my hope that we can sit here together uncertain about what will emerge from this diffractive praxis in the next 45 minutes. This engagement, I hope, is joyful and a joyful interruption that offers solace to our routinized, commodified, competitive spaces of the academy, where political effects put pressures on our minds and on our bodies. So you may want to know why I chose art or why I chose visual material. I am a child of the 60s. I started school learning under an impoverished apartheid system. I lived by a single story mostly. At the age of 5, I remember being coaxed by my dad to draw. By the age of 7, I was able to skillfully imitate the illustration of a leopard. This memory drawing expresses that joyful moment when the imagination and curiosity playfully oozed into the creation of an artwork. I recall that this was inspired by a Christmas card from Dad's white bosses and colleagues. This was one of many proudly displayed on the old Imbuya sideboard. This was an annual feature. Wise old Dad had another use for his varied collections of greeting cards to nudge the artist in me, this awkward, inquisitive child. I suppose it was an uninterrupted interruption to my ordinary school days. The leopard drawing, like many others I did for Dad, was my only avenue to learning about pencil sketching. I had done more than daydream about strange animals that I've never seen in my life. With my pencil in hand, strange creatures could come alive. I could connect emotionally with the artwork and the leopard. I enjoyed that Dad was proud of my skill and proud of my observation for detail. And he was ever ready to show off my artful imitations to whoever visited. If there was a sense of vocation to becoming attentive to the detail of people's narratives, mine was born in the smell and the feel of that thick 6B pencil, the pencil sharpenings, the large imbuya dining room table, and a sideboard filled with ornaments, things, and just stuff. I learned quite early that making beautiful art required a keen sense of observation and skill for detail. Leopards, art, animals were not part of my everyday, yet I felt joy and the most pleasurable and affirming moments to think, to voice, to connect, to create, to imagine, to identify with the other. I cherish those moments of joy. And this kind of drawing has traces that can be sometimes erased by culture, the culture of education as we know it. School interrupted my learning and joyful curiosity that I made with the world. Apartheid schooling spaces meant that I could not pursue my interest in art making, a privilege that was reserved for whites-only schools. And behaviorism and the mindless embrace of instructional objectives was the order of the day. I grew voiceless and invisible as an experiencing being and a learner, exacerbating my singular story as a passive, unquestioning learner. How I admire those brave souls who never betrayed their artistic instincts. Gerard Sokoto comes to mind, a South African pioneering Black artist, and like many others, Miriam Makeba Africa, they were treated like outsiders. Gerard Sokoto had to leave the country of his birth and go into exile in France. After 12 years of this kind of schooling, I never quite anticipated pursuing a career in the field of visual arts, let alone become an art teacher in a public school. Studying art under the tutorship of white lecturers at the University of Durban-Westville in the late 70s was painful, was alienating, because it was a diet of Western ideas, perspective drawing, triangular compositions, and principles of design, elements of art. I never quite knew what I was doing because the art wasn't connecting with my experience and my ideas and my joyful knowing. I struggled to connect. For 2 years, I felt that I was never good enough, a stranger in the one place I thought I could find my bearings. Art felt strange and foreign, a sense of disconnect and incurable melancholia. Studying visual art was no easy ride and no shortcuts, only hard work. Sitting for hours in the library, paging through books of fine art, stored in the reserved section of the library, not really knowing what I'm looking for and what I was doing. I just worked hard, imitating, acquiring the skill of observation and the detail of great masters, practicing daily the principles of design and composition. I managed to acquire the prescribed skills eventually, but there was no joy in learning. Fridays were my worst nightmare. It was when we had to put up our art for critique, a practice called art appreciation. It was far from appreciation. It was my amateurish spirit and my unquenchable thirst for the love and interest in the larger picture that drove me to become an art teacher in schools. The project of the educational imagination was affirming. It was painting that saved me in that time and enabled me to pass and qualify. The emotions and ideas flowed through the brushes, filling up canvas boards. I learned to love to paint. I embraced strangerhood and alienation as a desirable state. I painted furiously, resisting and refusing failure, nourishing and sustaining difference, despite the restrictions of obtaining a qualification and mastering technique. I managed to qualify as an art specialist. For 13 years, I served as a specialist art teacher in schools I taught in Stanger, a familiar place because that's where I grew up. There was initial excitement, curiosity, because I didn't really know what to do in this authentic teaching space. With the notion that I needed to impart knowledge, art knowledge more specifically, to teach learners the technique and the necessary skills of observation and imitation, and how to measure, and how to develop triangular compositions. As a holder of specialist knowledge, I was proud. I felt a sense of home. This painting here resembles and expresses the child that's in me that was surfaced. The art piece gives expression to my joy. Engaging with visual art and the smell of thick, heavy art textbooks, I felt at home. Teaching the necessary technical skills in painting, in drawing, and enabling joyful connections with learners who believed that they could never draw or paint. But soon, newness faded to routine. Pursuing art as a learner became a highly technical exercise to perform and to obtain high marks. Awards, rewards, recognition, marks. It was all about portfolios, perfecting technique. Learners became disconnected, frustrated. I was arrogant that students were not taking in all this expertise and as an expert in art teaching. The routine confined us to a narrow area of knowledge. I was losing sight of anything outside of my immediate area of focus and expertise, and what was happening around us in the general area of art culture. Art was not about nourishing lives and sustaining livelihoods and everyday lives. It was not a joyful experience. It was disconnecting learners from the everyday. In 1995, I was told that the successful art school curriculum would be discontinued. Within the whole reconstructed school curriculum being aligned to the market-related demands, I chose to leave. I colluded in my own oppression and marginalization as an art teacher. I accepted the general assumption that art did not have value in helping one with the complexity of lived experience, sustaining life, and survival. This I appreciate now was the failure of the education of the imagination, a failure of the education of the aesthetic, a value that I now appreciate as infinite and invaluable. It was a moral failure, a denial that I only appreciate now as I engage critically in my present liberating work in visual and art space research. It has the potential to be a decolonizing endeavor. Leaving home. Leaving this painting that I created was in many ways a departure, a separation, a parting, a retreat. It was not just a mere physical one, it was a psychological one. And I left to join the Faculty of Education at the University of Durban, Westfield in 1996. What a critical time in the history of South Africa. Leaving the school space for me was a flight out of self-closure and the city of my comfort. Taking up this new space at a critical moment was an authentic opportunity for me to see education as a project of democracy, to become curious again about the complexity of educational practice and educational experience. I needed to seriously consider what my limits were in being able to do this. Daily, I came face to face with a diverse class. Most of my Black students who chose to do integrated arts at the university in preparing to become teachers had not been exposed to visual art and performing arts as school children because of decades of deliberate impoverishment of apartheid's educational provisioning. I needed to step back and to find a material place from which to view educational practice. Stepping back was to enable me to look at teacher education in a different way. Not an activity for the acquisition of necessary skills and knowledge to acquire professional status, but to get a different view of what it means to be a teacher in teacher education, what it means to be a teacher educator, and how teaching of the arts would prepare teachers in classrooms in a connected way. I had to work hard to enter these spaces that I didn't really know much about. Moving from a school teacher responsibility in a high school to a university as a teacher educator was a really, really big shift. But my amateurist consciousness took over to raise moral issues of this highly professionalized and technical activity that I went through, of teaching as being more than what I had experienced, because now it was about my country, its power and its young people, the citizens and society at large. I turned the gaze on myself. This painting represents or expresses me actually being lost in an entire, I would say, a forest of flowers. Because that's what I was hoping and imagining about creating a kind of pedagogical culture that would enable the making of a teacher that would care, that would be compassionate, and that would love being a teacher at a time when there was a malaise and many teachers wanted to leave. How can the arts be taught? How can the arts be taught beyond technique and a set of skills to imitate reality and a keen sense of observation? What theories of teacher education will recognize and enhance teachers and student teachers' embodied feelings and personal experiences of marginalization, of alienation, and those values that held them together? What do I need to do to set up the conditions to make art and art making connecting spaces for students, teachers' voice, and for reconnecting them to the values that sustain and nourish everyday life erased by education? Scatterings, the painting, gives expression to my experiences of moving out of my comfort zone as Noah and the carrier of specialist knowledge. A sense of homelessness and discomfort was actually not a bad experience, because it nudged me. It nudged me to disrupt the seamless, taken for granted notions that I was carrying with me from being a school teacher to being a teacher educator. In deepening and understanding and opening up ideas and scholarly ways of thinking of teacher education and what it means to be a teacher now in this present shift in South Africa, meant that I had to take up different kinds of spaces and positions. As an emerging researcher, I became I took up the position of a young researcher in the master project. Michael Samuel was instrumental in inviting me to participate in a five-country research project of developing countries, to develop research skills and scholarly understandings of pre-service teacher education and the experiences of what it means to become teachers and what it may mean for us and for the kinds of teachers for South African schools. I then did a master's study, fueled by the care to think openly about art programs in different teacher education qualifications in institutions in KZN, institutions of higher learning. And then challenging my hierarchical notions of art as objects to be displayed in museums spaces, museumized knowledge, or locked in some heavy, thick textbook in the libraries. What did I have to do? I had to draw on my students' experiences. And together, collectively, we sought out spaces, joyful spaces, imagining spaces, authentic opportunities. I attended workshops with my students on bead making, basket weaving. We invited bead making artists to teach us. Shingiwe Dube from the Art Center, African Art Center, teaching us the art of bead making. We saw beads turn into love letters. We visited and worked with resident artists from Charlie, with them at the Edgewood College, meeting other colleagues struggling with the same kind of issues I was. I learned the art of storytelling and story writing from Prinam Shlope, the Honorable Prinam Shlope, whose stories traced us back to times and places of people. We saw Ilala reeds turn from red, yellow, brown, and then to beautiful imbenges. Visiting Bina Gumeda in Slabisa, we saw how raw earth turned into pit fire, turned into earth ovens to create pit fire pots to drink traditional Zulu beer. We also went to museums, but we went to local museums. We went to the Bat Center. We visited Ardmore Gallery to immerse ourselves in the local artists making art. We were so proud to hear that the pots of Nesta Nala and her daughters were being exhibited in Switzerland. She was from the Tugela Ferry area. Slowly and with very hard work, I started to dismantle traditional ways of thinking and disrupting my Western ways of knowing art, my theories of knowledge production, and how and in what ways I could draw on students' personal experiences and feelings and ideas. Because that was the ethical thing to do at this point in time. This lively dialogue of knowledge production that we felt in all these authentic spaces and opportunities, together with particular knowledge theories that recognize tacit and embodied knowledge, made my pedagogy look quite different. And it turned my lectures into something much more radical and lively. Breaking free speaks to my creative doctoral scholarship with successful teachers. It was a high watermark of my scholarly creative thinking about ordinary teachers inhabiting South African classrooms. But these teachers were experiencing being teacher with some sense of fulfillment and joy at a time of general malaise and the desire to leave. Why breaking free? Arts-based research allowed me to break free from the traditional boundaries as an educational researcher. How? Because I was able to draw on art. I was able to use the cubist metaphor to read, to explain, to represent, and to interpret the complexity of ordinary teachers' everyday lives and the values that connected them to their subject, to their learners, and to their lives as teachers in very embodied ways. And I needed to know how. It was arts-based methods that allowed me to understand and to work with that complexity. Just think about it. So often we go into the field, we interview teachers, we generate all this data about what happens in their lives. But then we pack them up in little boxes and we bring them back to our offices or to our studying spaces to analyze them, to code them. and to find some solution or an answer to the problem. But in the process of that linearity, we become so reductionist. We suck the life out of the actual complexity of the experiences that we encountered when the teachers were telling their stories. Arts-based research allows us to actually work with that complexity. And that makes creative knowledge production transgressive. Thinking with art, in many ways, is a form of resistance to traditional ways of understanding teachers' lives, beyond mere technicians and deliverers of knowledge and docile bodies. This thesis, I would argue, is a work of art, because through it, I learned about the kinds of teachers we need to prepare for South African classrooms. Creatively thinking with art as a metaphor enable complex, multifaceted interpretation of teachers, who they are, what they do, why they do what they do. Valuing creative thinking surfaced different voices of teachers in everyday situations, and these became authentic opportunities for understanding their pedagogy that connected them to the diversity that they confronted and encountered daily. This, I argue, was ethical work. This painting, Breaking Free, was in a way feeling a sense of home, because in a way, it was a representation of my embodied ways of scholarly thinking. With this deepened and insightful understanding of teachers, I felt quite comfortable that I had a fuller view of my ethical responsibility now as a teacher educator. And I also had a deep understanding of how the arts could enhance the teacher education program teacher education programs as a project of democracy. Sadly, the desire soon faded. Rumblings of restructuring since 1998 finally came to bear on us as an intellectual, in my becoming an intellectual, when I realized that in this process of expanding and developing new ideas, as intellectuals, we still have to work. We don't work as autonomous, individualistic beings. Universities and societies still hem in and cajole us and surround us with prizes and rewards, and often with denigration and ridicule of the work we do, because it is defined by set norms and expectations. However, while we cannot remain outside the university, Said explains, the intellectual is never more an intellectual than when surrounded, cajoled, hemmed in, hectored by society to be one thing or the other. So what were some of the pressures I had to negotiate? Higher education transformation and restructuring and mergers in the name of efficiency and market-driven agendas and values ripped through the democratic educational decolonial project post-1994, at a time when we hoped we would be assembling a truly liberatory education system. To work with that rational logic and outcomes-based education was depth of the intellectual. The intellectual was at risk. The intellectual is at risk. UDW, like many other universities, was pushed and pulled apart by the neoliberal agenda, driven by national imperatives of modularization of courses, and that had to correspond with employment opportunities. The teacher education program now boasted radical combinations of a generic educator. I thought that was an anti-intellectual agenda and an assault on teacher education as a creative and radical space for making of teachers differently. I had to reprofessionalize, become viable, I was told, become marketable and presentable if you still see yourself as part of the Faculty of Education. The neoliberal project was intent on producing new forms of subjectivity and sanctioning particular modes of conduct on the intellectual. These were words of Giraud. I had to find the antidote. So I went in search of it. I had to find ways to resist the sense of melancholia. The refusal to be tamed by the label professional and professionalism, driven by productivity units and professional and technical efficiency, spurred me on. I took my cue from T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. This was for me, starting all over again, to think, to connect, to experiment in artful ways, to read, to write, and to become curious again for new scholarly ways of thinking about our responsibility as teacher educators. I drew on what Giraud termed the engaged intellectual. In this particular position, I was trying to connect the work that I was interested in, the work on teachers' lives, to a more broader concern, social concern, that affect how people outside of just teacher education and student teachers, how they live, how they work, and how they survive. Because I had very limited experience as a teacher educator. I took up a range of invitations. I think this painting here expresses what opened up for me and what I was open to, just to develop ideas, the love for new ideas, for new ways of thinking. I participated in projects and initiatives in the Faculty of Education with colleagues that I would never have worked with before. In fact, it was a merger that made that possible. We found ourselves drawn together by the need to resist the neoliberal project and to pursue our interests in the bigger picture. As academics, we have the accountability to our citizens, to the people, and to the realities that we were facing as a Faculty of Education. Just to give you a sense of how hard I had to work, between 2005 and 2014, I participated as co-investigator and as project leader in over 5 NRF-funded research projects, through 4 disciplinary funded projects, 4 institution-wide projects, 2 development, school, university partnership projects. And I think working in that broad and expansive way at a national level with the PPER project, which was trying to map up how and what universities were doing in 10 years into democracy, what kinds of research are being produced, or how were we just reproducing the same kind of research about teacher education. This really opened up my mind about educational research. The university-wide projects on knowledge interchange really got me thinking about how knowledge interchange is happening at a time when internationalization was becoming a critical part of the workings of our university. Disciplinary projects, self-reflexive research, research learning on memory work, teacher development, alternate methodologies, what it means to be a researcher now, and importantly, questioning my responsibility as a researcher. Nothing about us without us. Every voice counts. Working with teachers in rural contexts. working in Vulindlela, going to schools in Kushla and Governor, really understanding different teachers, different lives, different experiences. It was hard work, but it was practice and passion to deepen thought and ideas, and to plan and think and ground ourselves in deep and connected ways with what it means to move beyond a very routinized way of working, to develop different perspectives from a range of projects on what it is to become curious about the education of the educational imagination, which Eisner refers to. So it was many, many years of hard work. Many, many years of learning from each other, with each other. We were ready to take the ideas and thoughts that we were so grounded in, to now put them to work, to now creatively and playfully imagine what possibilities it could offer us. It was art-based research that was actually giving us the space for imagining what it is to be different, where we could playfully ask ourselves questions. What are we as academics? Who am I as an academic? And asking that question and allowing for a personal emotion and a personal experience to be infleshed in an art piece, so that they could gaze at it and actually study it now in an infleshed form, in a tangible form, in a material form. This particular focus that now brought us to a more specific context of higher education is what Giraud refers to as a specific intellectual, dealing with specific issues for a specific context. And it was about higher education and academics. So from a very broad perspective on education, now to bring that experience to now work it for academics in higher education. It was the co-creative learning that enabled us to take risks. So two of the key projects that highlight how we went public in a very, very, I think, explicit and relentless way to find the space to actually practice our ideas, to do it. Because in the doing of it, we could imagine what was possible. There were two international research symposiums we co-hosted. In 2016, we were funded by the UK IRG NRF Links grant for hosting scientific events. We hosted the symposium, not just an object, making meaning of and from everyday objects in educational research. This symposium brought together a diverse body of academics working in higher education institutions. It was diverse in every way: disciplinary interests, ethnicity, race, values. But what brought us together was to be able to play and to creatively think. In 2019, sorry, the one thing in this project, not just about object, we learned from expert facilitators how to take abstract ideas that we had developed and make them spaces to engage with. Because we really wanted to understand how we as academics could move beyond being mere technicians working to productivity units and notional teaching hours. Over the 3 days, it was workshops, it was activities. It was imagination spaces, connecting to the heart, not just having an idea, but connecting with the heart to that idea, embodying it, living it, feeling it, experiencing it. And I think that's what arts-based research and visual art enabled us to do. So it was moving beyond the cerebral borders to connect to this position of being academic and becoming something other. Interestingly, in this particular symposium, we challenged the whole notion of what is data. We were evoking stories of personal experiences using everyday objects. A coffee cup, a broken pen, things that you would otherwise never take notice of. The next project and symposium in 2019 was the object inquiry for social cohesion in public higher education, exploring academic identities and fostering shared values across diverse universities. We had gone bigger. We invited academics from different national institutions because we wanted to actually start working beyond our own institution. These were high watermarks in our experiments and relentless combat, not to be reduced to mere neoliberal subjects. These are just some of the infleshments, ethical infleshments of the work we did. These are some of the books that were edited, which was central to creative ways of thinking, creative knowledge, drawn from academics' personal stories of experience. And that is what made this ethical research. It made it scholarly ethical research. It was embodied. It was research that we connected to, not in terms of just what was popular and what was the flavor of the day, but those cerebral thoughts were artfully and creatively drawing on personal experience. Just to say that we had 7 special issues, 4 edited books, and a whole range of chapters and journal articles, which were scholarly infleshments, drawing on art, art making, and knowledge theories that draw on personal stories. This was more than an ethical project. It was also political, social, and a philosophical endeavor. With this embodied way of knowing and understanding and researching and publishing, this painting, My Body Carries the Antidote, expresses the freeing up of my body, seeing it in a different way, a truly liberatory moment, a connection of love and care for art making and for art. It reflects my capacity to depersonalize the neoliberal event. The sage leaves, by the way, is what I represented as the neoliberal malaise. But in this artwork, it adds to its beauty. I love the contrast. The body still looms large, moving and shifting ambiguously, this or that, always becoming open to reworkings. I chose to experience how I know and practice the neoliberal subject now as a work of art. This creative and embodied enfleshment, which I share with you here, offers a livable alternative to becoming intellectual and to avoid the neoliberal apocalypse. I want to take you back here now to the assemblage that was created in this particular forum over the past 40 odd minutes. It was artwork, it was Zoom, it was you, the viewer and the listener, it was concepts. All of these heterogeneous relationships of human and post-human, or I would say human and beyond human, interconnecting and oozing with affect. Was there an opportunity for you to lose some sense of what you think you are, and for an opening and a finding of another? It is my hope that each artwork opened up a space for generating a shared understanding of the kinds of subjects that we are in the process of becoming in and through our work in the academy. The affirmative ethical moments shared across the 13 nodal moments is a creation about finding joy in difference. And I'm hoping that what was experienced there was an entangling of words, of ideas, of perspectives, of concepts, of knowledge and values. This painting, titled Unconditional, in Zen philosophy, we learn that the ultimate is found in the ordinary. The process of doing the drawing of my more than human companion, Titan, was a tangible and embodied experience to learn the art of embodied living. From him, I have a memory of unconditional love and a deep sense of connectedness. And this symbolically repositions the way I think, I feel, and the way I write. This is not received traditional knowledge, learned from a textbook, but a maker epistemology, a term that was coined by Kate Parr in 2017, in which my art making and creative doing of thinking and being brings to life my research, learning, and becoming. This love and unquenchable thirst for the ordinary and everyday as authentic opportunities of losing and finding is an ongoing work in progress. At this point in time, I want to also unconditionally offer my gratitude to a range of people that are present and not present, but also to forgive me for missing you out, because I think in the past, the 25 odd years that I've been working as a teacher education, you've crossed my paths in many ways, and I've crossed yours. Claudio Mitchell, Lebo Melatsani, Betty Govenden, Kathleen Pitas Morgan, Kate Parr, Jennifer Charteris, Adele, Nahi, Divya Bana, thank you for those authentic imagination spaces. Rabi Danpat, Harsh Khatar, Vitalis Chikoko, Nadine, Julia Perma, your critical friendship and care matter. The self-reflexives team, your uncomfortable questions inspire me to keep moving. The tedious team, when feeling at home mattered when everything else crumbled. The A team for making being on the margins a magical scholarly space. The dean for your aesthetic leadership. My students for allowing me to dream with you, despite the nightmares. Tabile Sibaya, Sabelo Mtembu, Bengi Bongi Bengo, Tula Satola, Nelisiwe, Kumalo, I could not do without your support. Mr. Goyani, Miss Cindy, for always having hope. Eric, Duma, home is never the same without you. Labby, your care is limitless. My brother Krish and sister-in-law Saras and my extended family, nieces, nephews, cousins, thank you for being part of this journey. Puvi for keeping the home fires burning and nudging me on. Diaran, my son, I see through you how different the world can be. Mom, your beautiful, caring spirit and making home a sacred place is cherished. Dad, wherever you are, thank you for your wisdom and for injecting our ordinary lives with beauty. And finally, the universe and my spiritual guide, Swami Satya Sai Baba. Thank you to everybody.
Professor Pillay, what a brilliant, fantastic inaugural lecture. Thank you for demonstrating what it means to live your work. You'll be pleased to note that I have your book here, which demonstrates the range of exciting projects that you've done over the years. You have assisted us today to shift from the formulaic, technical, and routine ways of doing academia. You've helped us to trouble the neoliberal agenda, which is characterized and continues to characterize academia today. You've taken us through a process of becoming, your own process of becoming, a process of resistance, of self-exploration, of discovery. You've shown us that life, as you said, cannot just simply be captured only in words. You've shown us that an artist can also be a theorist. You've opened us up to a process in which you expose yourself as a searching soul, as one of your colleagues noted in the chat line, that is Dr. Betty Govenden. You've also shown yourself to be, as she again captured, an impastoral pedagogy, offering a passionate pedagogy. You have also made us wonder, where is art in education? And as I sit here and I reflect and I think about the damage that has occurred in the process of trying to marketize and expand higher education, and the destruction that has happened to creativity and the arts, you've made us reflect on that and ponder as to whether we're going in the right direction or not. You've noted that education is a project of democracy. And if it is indeed a project of democracy, what are we doing to think through differently about how we do education and how we center the arts? Thank you for such a brilliant, fascinating talk. I want to thank all of you for attending this afternoon's inaugural, which was deeply fascinating, as you can tell. And as I can see from the very many comments that you've relayed today, you are very much enthralled by what Professor Pillay had to offer. I want to thank Professor Pillay's family, her husband, Puvi, who's been there with her all along the way, family members, the nieces, the son, the mum, and the nephews who are all here today. I also want to thank the collaborators who've supported Professor Pillay all along the way, who are also in attendance today. We thank you for your hard work and your commitment in supporting our colleague and in ensuring that her career succeeds and thrives in the ways that it has. I also do want to extend my gratitude to the CRD team, Pamela Adams, Kodiswa, and a number of other colleagues who have been working with Professor Pillay in organizing this talk. We're grateful. The Office of the Registrar, Sandia, Mark, as well as Musa. I think Musa is coming from ICS, and I think he's gone now. Another colleague who was here earlier, who was assisting us from the Registrar's Office. We're thankful, colleagues. To the students, to the colleagues who've supported Professor Pillay, we're grateful, colleagues. Have a fantastic afternoon. Congratulations, Professor Pillay, an outstanding inaugural lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, colleagues. A great afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, cheers all.